He spent over a decade as one of the most recognizable faces on reality television, bickering, bidding, and building a brand around being the scrappy underdog of the storage auction world. Then, almost overnight, he vanished. No farewell episode, no goodbye post, no explanation from the network that made him famous. Just silence. What actually happened to Jarrod Schulz? And why did the man once known as one half of Storage Wars' most beloved on-screen pair disappear so completely from the show and from public life that fans are still asking questions about him years later? Jarrod Schulz was born on October 15, 1977, in Long Beach, California. Long before storage lockers or reality television entered the picture, he was, by his own description, a restless kid who liked to take things apart just to understand how they worked, an early curiosity that would later translate into an eye for spotting value in other people's abandoned belongings. His path to that career wasn't a straight line. As a young man, he ran into serious trouble with the law, ultimately serving time in custody related to a drug offense, a chapter of his life he rarely discussed publicly once cameras started following him around. After his release, he worked to rebuild, eventually landing a job as a sales manager at a carpet cleaning company in Tustin, California. It was there in 1999 that he met a young employee named Brandi Passante, and the two quickly became inseparable, both personally and professionally. Together, Jarrod and Brandi built a life around buying abandoned storage units and reselling whatever they found inside, eventually opening a thrift store called Now and then in Orange, California, to give their finds a permanent home. It was hands-on, unpredictable work, the kind that didn't guarantee a paycheck from one auction to the next, but it was theirs. When producers were scouting cast members for a new reality series centered on storage auctions, Jarrod and Brandi stood out. And in December 2010, Storage Wars premiered on A&E. Almost immediately, the show became appointment viewing for a certain kind of TV audience, one drawn to unpredictable personalities and even more unpredictable storage lockers. Jarrod, brash and aggressive at the podium, quickly earned the nickname The Young Gun, a title he shared with Brandi as the two of them positioned themselves as the scrappy new blood challenging veterans like Daryl Sheets and outspoken figures like Dave Hester. What made the show work, though, wasn't just the bidding. It was the relationship. Jarrod and Brandi bickered on camera constantly, disagreeing over bids, trading jabs, occasionally clashing in ways that felt uncomfortably real for a reality show built around treasure hunting. Audiences ate it up. In 2014, the pair was given their own spin-off, Brandi and Jarrod, Married to the Job, a title that implied a legal marriage that, according to multiple entertainment outlets, never actually existed. The two were long-term domestic partners, not legally married, and they shared 2 children together, a son named Cameron and a daughter named Peyton. The spin-off followed their attempt to expand their thrift store business into a second location, presenting them as a united front working toward a shared dream. It ran for 8 episodes before being canceled, and behind the scenes, according to later reporting, cracks in that united front were already forming. The business side of their partnership was struggling more than viewers realized. The second thrift store location, the very one featured in their spin-off, never turned a profit and eventually closed. And by several accounts, both of their original storefronts had shut down by the mid-2010s. Jarrod tried branching out on his own, launching a clothing line called Outlaw Apparel years earlier. But that venture also faded over time, its website and social media presence going quiet. Increasingly, their livelihood depended less on the storage auction business that had made them famous and more on the paychecks that came from being television personalities. That kind of financial and personal strain doesn't always show up on screen, but according to Brandi's own later comments and interviews, the pressure was very real behind the scenes, and it was compounding. By her own account, given years later on a podcast appearance, Brandi felt she had lost a significant part of her own identity during those years, describing herself as carrying much of the parenting load while Jarrod's attention was divided across business ventures and his television persona. Whatever the exact dynamics were behind closed doors, the partnership that had defined both their public images for the better part of a decade quietly ended after Storage Wars wrapped its 12th season, which aired in 2018. They didn't announce it. They didn't address it. They simply kept showing up to film together, maintaining the appearance of a couple long after the relationship itself had ended. During those same years, both Jarrod and Brandi were living increasingly public lives outside the auction yard, even as their private relationship was unraveling. In interviews given around 2016, Jarrod spoke about how being with Brandi had changed even small parts of his daily life, crediting her love of cooking with shifting his own relationship with food from something purely functional into something he actually looked forward to. Around the same period, Brandi became more active on social media, sharing a steady stream of family moments, including a widely shared post from April 2016 showing her taking her son to meet a costumed Star Wars character, the kind of ordinary parenting milestone that stood in sharp contrast to the high-stakes bidding battles she was known for on screen. Her public style was shifting too, moving gradually from the bold, fitted looks of her earlier television years toward something more relaxed and comfortable as she moved through her 30s, a small but noticeable signal, in hindsight, of a woman quietly becoming someone slightly different from the character audiences had grown used to watching. Storage Wars then went on an extended hiatus, and when it returned for its 13th season in 2021, longtime viewers immediately sensed something had shifted. Jarrod and Brandi were no longer arriving to auctions together. Their interactions on screen were noticeably colder, more distant, occasionally tense in a way that read as more genuine than the manufactured bickering of earlier seasons. Early in that season, Brandi confirmed publicly what many fans had already begun to suspect. She and Jarrod were no longer together, and the split had actually happened roughly 2 years earlier. For an audience that had spent over a decade invested in their dynamic, it was a significant recalibration of everything they thought they understood about the two of them. Fans largely assumed that was the extent of the story, a long-term couple who had quietly grown apart and were now navigating the awkwardness of continuing to co-star on a hit show. Then came April 30th, 2021. According to reporting from TMZ, later corroborated by statements from the Orange County District Attorney's Office, Brandi was out with friends at a bar in Lake Forest, California, when Jarrod arrived unannounced. What started as a heated exchange escalated quickly. Witnesses said Brandi asked him to leave, and when he refused, the situation intensified further. According to law enforcement sources, Jarrod pushed Brandi on 2 separate occasions while shouting at her and the friend she was with. Someone at the scene contacted police, but Jarrod had already left by the time officers arrived. When investigators later interviewed him, he denied ever putting his hands on her. The district attorney's office did not find that denial convincing. On May 16, 2021, prosecutors formally charged Jarrod with 1 count of misdemeanor domestic violence battery. That charge did not exist in a vacuum. Court records reviewed by multiple entertainment and legal affairs outlets show that Jarrod had already been charged with resisting a police officer following a separate incident in Lake Forest back in July 2019. Then, just months after the domestic violence charge in October 2021, he was charged again, this time with driving under the influence, with a reported blood alcohol level at or above California's legal threshold. By 2023, all 3 cases had reportedly been consolidated into a single court proceeding, with hearings scheduled throughout that year. Public reporting at the time suggested his legal team may have been pursuing a resolution short of a full trial, though a clear, widely confirmed final outcome for all 3 cases has not been consistently documented in available public reporting, and that uncertainty is worth acknowledging rather than guessing at. The professional fallout was far easier to track. Within days of the domestic violence charge becoming public, A&E reportedly opened an internal review to determine Jarrod's future on the show. The network never released a detailed statement explaining what happened next, and it never confirmed whether he was let go or chose to step back voluntarily. But the outcome spoke for itself. Jarrod had appeared regularly through season 13, and when season 14 arrived, he was gone, never to return as a full-time cast member. He also went largely silent in his personal life, posting to social media only sporadically in the years that followed and avoiding the kind of tell-all interviews that often accompany a public fall like this one. What has he actually been doing since then? According to reporting on public records and his own social media, Jarrod purchased the Rush Bar and Grill in Lake Forest, California, taking over a restaurant that had operated under previous family ownership since 2015. The business's own marketing describes him as a self-made entrepreneur focused on building a neighborhood spot with a family atmosphere. And by most available accounts, the restaurant has continued operating. He also appears to have moved on romantically, with photos surfacing publicly of him alongside a woman named Rochelle Beckman, someone he's reportedly been in a relationship with since around 2021. Interestingly, according to observers who have followed his social media closely, Jarrod never removed old photos of himself with Brandi from his accounts, a small but noticeable detail in an otherwise heavily scaled-back online presence. Brandi, meanwhile, took a very different path forward. Rather than stepping back from the spotlight, she stayed in it, continuing to appear on Storage Wars in the seasons that followed, including Season 15 in 2023 and the show's expanded 1-hour Season 16 in 2025, this time as a standalone cast member rather than one half of a duo. In October 2021, she shared a post on Instagram revealing a new tattoo on her finger, the word "free," accompanied by a small bird, explaining in the caption that it represented having escaped, in her words, a very difficult situation that many people find themselves trapped in. She tagged the post in connection with Domestic Violence Awareness Month, without going into further detail, and the message resonated with a large number of her followers. In the years since, she has spoken more openly in interviews about reclaiming her sense of identity, has taken on primary responsibility for raising Cameron and Peyton, and has been linked publicly to a new relationship with real estate professional and bar owner Clifford Beaver, a relationship she has described in warmer, steadier terms than her years with Jarrod. In the summer of 2025, she also launched her own podcast, The Real Reality with Brandi Passante, interviewing other public figures about fame and life after the cameras stopped rolling, a clear signal that her career, unlike Jarrod's, was still very much moving forward. Looking at where each of them landed, the contrast is hard to ignore. One half of Storage Wars' original breakout couple is still on the show, still building new projects, still visibly part of the public conversation around the series she helped launch back in 2010. The other has all but disappeared from the world that made him famous, running a bar in Lake Forest, maintaining a quiet relationship, and staying almost entirely out of the media he once thrived in front of. Whatever combination of business struggles, personal strain, and legal trouble led to that outcome, the shift wasn't sudden. It built for years, mostly out of view of the cameras that had been trained on Jarrod and Brandi for over a decade, right up until a night in April 2021 finally forced it into the open. A spokesperson for the Orange County District Attorney's Office told media outlets covering the case at the time that, because the courts generally do not hold out-of-custody misdemeanor defendants, it would likely be some time before Jarrod's case actually reached a courtroom, a detail that helps explain why the legal process dragged on for years rather than resolving quickly. Throughout that stretch, neither Jarrod nor Brandi addressed the situation directly in a public statement, leaving fans to piece the story together largely through court filings and outside reporting rather than anything either of them said themselves. That silence on both sides is part of what makes the story so different from a usual reality television arc, where even the messiest moments are typically narrated, teased, and eventually explained on camera. Here, the most consequential turn in the story happened almost entirely off-screen, and the show itself never directly acknowledged it. It's worth remembering, too, that almost none of this played out the way reality television usually presents its storylines. There was no dramatic confrontation scene, no produced reveal episode, no tidy resolution. The audience got a 2-year-old confirmation of a breakup delivered almost in passing, followed months later by a criminal charge that the show itself never directly addressed on screen. Jarrod's departure from Storage Wars happened in the space between seasons, quietly, without commentary from the network that had built an empire partly on his and Brandi's chemistry. That's often how real fallout works, not as a single explosive moment captured on camera, but as a slow accumulation of choices and consequences that eventually becomes impossible to keep hidden. There's also something worth noting in how differently each of them has chosen to handle their public image since. Jarrod's approach has been near total withdrawal, a handful of promotional posts for his restaurant, an occasional glimpse of his personal life, and otherwise silence. Brandi's approach has been almost the opposite, gradually opening up in podcast interviews, addressing her breakup indirectly through things like the free tattoo rather than a tell-all statement, and eventually building an entire second career around having honest conversations with other public figures about fame and identity. Neither approach explains exactly what happened behind closed doors during their nearly 20 years together, but the contrast says something about how each of them chose to move forward once the partnership and the show that built around it no longer bound them together. So is Jarrod Schulz's story always destined to end this way? Or did a series of smaller decisions, business ventures that didn't pan out, legal trouble that kept resurfacing, a relationship that quietly deteriorated for years before anyone said so publicly, add up to something neither he nor anyone watching at home saw coming? What do you think shaped his path more, the past he carried into the relationship, or the choices he made once the cameras were rolling? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown of one of reality TV's most talked about departures interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.